Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Leonidas, and today I'm going to be giving a case presentation on the civil case, the Liebeck versus McDonald's case. This case is very important because it was a landmark case in civil law tort for product liability because of the really high payout. But first of all, let's talk about something that concerns this case. Who hasn't waited patiently in line in a drive-thru only to get their coffee, and then suddenly the coffee spills on you because the lid isn't on too tight or the coffee's too hot, and then you get burnt? Well, this is the case with Stella Liebeck, but they can multiply that by a few times because Stella Liebeck got seriously hurt. Let's begin with some of the facts of the case, or what we'd be talking about. This case is extremely significant because the large payout on the case. Ms. Liebeck won a significant amount of money and brought to light the issues of frivolous lawsuits, which is what people initially saw in this case. They thought, this was a really large amount of money, and this case was just blown out of proportion. But it also highlights therefore it highlights the issues with media exaggeration of the facts to downplay some serious issues and ignoring facts. An example, but it's also uh, more importantly, it's an example of an individual holding a large corporation accountable for their issues, for failure to make sure that they have a product that's safe. Which Let's talk about some of the legal concepts and definitions that was covered in this case. We talked about product liability, making a product that's not going to harm people, that's safe. We talk about negligence, whether it's the person that's using the product or the person that's making the products, making something that's able to be used safely in a manner that doesn't harm anybody. We talk about due care, the amount of attention that a reasonable person can take to make sure that there are no injuries caused by that product. And we talk about consumer protection laws, the fact that there's laws that make sure that these companies don't put products that hurt people out there. Next, let's get some facts about the plaintiff and the defendant. The plaintiff in this case was Stella Liebeck, the 79-year-old elderly woman that was harmed from the hot coffee. Then we have the defendant, McDonald's restaurant, which everybody knows, world renowned, been in business for years, multi-billion-dollar company. This occurred in the county of Bernalillo in the state of New Mexico, August 18th, 1994. The factual background of the case is Stella Liebeck, 79-year-old woman, was a McDonald's drive-through passenger. Her grandson was driving. She ordered the coffee, and they pulled over. Grandson was the driver's seat. Miss Liebeck was the front passenger. She, just like anybody else, wants to put some creamer in her coffee, put it between her legs, but this coffee spilled. Unbeknownst to Miss Liebeck, this coffee was so hot that it burned her so severely that she had to go to the doctor. She was hospitalized for 8 days. She had skin grafts. Ms. Liebeck sustained medical bills that were over $20,000. Initially, she did what most reasonable people would do. She reached out to McDonald's to try to get them to take care of some of these bills, the amount of $11,000. But McDonald's, they weren't having it. Yeah, they refused to accept fault. They offered her small, meager amount of $800. And that wasn't enough. Ms. Liebeck had missed work. She was severely injured, had mounting medical bills. Her kids had taken time off of work. They were struggling as well. And so the matter went to civil court. That's when the case got more interesting. Facts started coming out. Let's start with some of the facts. First of all, 700 people, there were 700 incidents prior to Ms. Liebeck of people getting injured at McDonald's from the hot coffee, sometimes severely. Other facts, the McDonald's executive even testified during this trial that McDonald's knew their coffee was hot, too hot to the fact that it was hurting people. McDonald's coffee was served at 180 to 190 degrees. That's extremely hot enough to cause third-degree burns within 3 seconds of something if the coffee isn't taken off. The regular cup of coffee that you get at home that you make from a coffee brew is 135 to 140 degrees. So this coffee was 60 degrees hotter than the regular cup of coffee, regular hot cup of coffee you get anywhere else. Miss Liebeck also sustained a severe amount of injuries. 6% of her body was burned. She received treatment for 2 years. And we talked about the skin grafts as well. Miss Liebeck on this trial asked for $100,000. Still not the millions we heard about, but just $100,000 to help take care of these bills. This analysis to the specific facts of this case, it also brings to light a significant legal conflicts involving product liability and frivolous lawsuits, which this case was going on, people came up to their own conclusions. They didn't know. Some thought it was a frivolous lawsuit. Others thought it was an individual holding a big company accountable. But as soon as the facts came out, we figured that was the latter. The individual that was harmed and reasonably needed some uh, assistance from this large corporation, and the matter ended up going into court. The outcome of the case, which ended up lasting 8 days, the jury decided in favor of Miss Liebeck. They decided that she was permanently injured as a result of the McDonald's hot coffee. They awarded her $2.9 million in punitive damages, $200,000 in compensatory damages. Large amount, but the jury believed that Miss Liebeck was harmed so severely, and they also wanted to send a message to McDonald's that it was unreasonable, unfair for them to have their coffee that hot to the point where it hurt this elderly woman so severely. The judge reduced this charge, reduced the punitive damage a little bit because he wanted to discourage any more frivolous lawsuits, but still, it was a very significant amount. The punitive damages were reduced to $640,000, while the compensatory damages were reduced to $160,000. Still a reasonable amount for the damages in the long trial. Contrary to what the media said about Miss Liebeck being a millionaire, while it was a large amount of money, it was reasonable in my eyes, for the ordeal that McDonald's put this lady through. And it brought to light some of the misgivings in these big companies, how they can try to get away with issues as serving coffee that's so hot that's going to harm people. Ultimately, my key learnings from this case is that McDonald's, in its initial experience and impression, suggested that they were just being taken advantage of by a customer that just was greedy, who was trying to make extra money. But once we started looking at the facts, we realized that they weren't doing their part for product liability, for consumer protection. They weren't putting a product out there that was safe for the consumer. And Ms. Liebeck was harmed as a result. And due to her tenacity and of her lawyer herself, they were able to win the case. The facts came out that this was a case, obviously, of a company not putting due care into their product. And it's also more important moving ahead. While there is a severe problem with frivolous lawsuits in this case, there is also the obligation for companies to put out a product that's safe and for people to hold these companies accountable, which is the case in Stella Liebeck and versus McDonald's. So next time you go to McDonald's and you grab a hot cup of coffee, make sure it's hot, but not too hot, because you never know, you might just get burned, 30-degree burns. Thank you very much. My name is Mario Leonidas, and this concludes my presentation.